primarily we'll be in John 11, hopefully the whole chapter. It does just kind of flow. And then we'll be taking a look a little bit in Hebrews, maybe a couple times in Matthew, Mark, and all that. Kind of tie some things together. John does sit aloof from the other Gospels, if you haven't noticed that by now. John's a little bit different than the others. If you get that Bible from the condensed Bible, you'll get Psalms, Proverbs, and you'll get John. Right? You don't get Mark, you don't get 2 Corinthians, you get John. If you've seen that condensed Bible. Psalms, Proverbs, and John. And so John definitely sits apart a little bit from the other Gospels. Lots of good stuff in there, of course, or else we wouldn't be studying, let alone it wouldn't be the Bible. So, but here in chapter 11, in order to set the stage, you know me, I don't like to just jump in. I like to kind of set the mood, kind of set the stage, kind of set the context. I want to do all that today for John chapter 11. John chapter 11 is a wonderful, wonderful chapter, and we're going to find out a little bit more about it. And so, what do we see so far? And I've actually written out these scriptures, and I'll just quickly read them. Is it any shock to anybody if I tell somebody that the Jews, the leadership, didn't like Jesus? Raise your hand if that is somehow new news. It's breaking. It's live. It's breaking. It's local. Right? It's not news. If you read John, which we've been doing, and if you've read the Gospels at all, Jesus had enemies. Okay, not that he was out there seeking enemies. That's not what he did. But because he preached the Word of God and he said some things that just lit up the Jewish leadership at the time. And so what I'll do is I'll just quickly read some of these scriptures, and you can, put these together for yourself. So 5:16 says, "For this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. Therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because he not only broke the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God." Let's go to our next one. 7:1. "After these things Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea, because the Jews sought to kill him." Are we picking up a theme? Verse 19, "Did not Moses give you the law, yet none of you keeps the law? Why do you seek to kill me?" People answered and said, "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" Now some of them from Jerusalem said, "Is this not whom they seek to kill?" Verse 32 says, "The Pharisees heard the crowd murmuring these things concerning him, and the Pharisees and the chief priests sent officers to take him." We're picking up a theme here. They want him dead. They want to arrest him. And we're not even done. 8:59 says, "Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by." So now they're moving from talking about it, sending spies, sending officers. Now they actually have stones in hand, ready to throw at him, ready to kill him. We're starting to make the transition here. And most recently is last week, 10:22. It says, "Now it was the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, and it was winter, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch." Harmless thing to do, you'd think. "Then the Jews surrounded him and said to him, 'How long do you keep us in doubt? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly.'" Now they're trying to ambush him. Verse 31, "Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. And Jesus answered them, 'Many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me?' The Jews answered him, saying, 'For a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God.'" Verse 39, "Therefore they sought again to seize him, but he escaped out of their hand." If you just read those scriptures in John, you'd think there's a big battle going on, and that despite their many efforts, the Jews can't grab Jesus. He escapes out of their midst. They can't seize him. They can't send officers to get him. They can't get a hold of him. He's too elusive, as it were. I don't think he's doing, these football moves or anything. I think it's just not his time. I don't think that it's his time to be captured. And the Bible's very specific about this, is that they didn't get him because it's not his time. And so it all happens in God's time. That brings me comfort to think about that. God had timing for his son, God has timing for us too. All things are in his time.
Have you ever wondered how he could slip out of there?
I think it was somewhat supernatural.
I kind of have thought about that. Maybe he just disappeared on him. Either that or not all of them were picking up stones. Maybe the leaders were picking up stones. Maybe the crowd wasn't quite there yet. Maybe he slipped in. It was a really crowded area. He maybe slipped in with a crowd that swallowed him up.
Yeah.
Either that or he just vanished.
Yeah.
I've often wondered how did he slip
Well,
out?
it says that the Jews surrounded him.
Oh yeah.
You surround somebody, you're not.
Yeah,
how do
gonna
you,
slip out. Yeah.
It's like the Red Rover thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're surrounding you. So
Yeah.
how do you escape that?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that would be something. Tell us plainly. Then going that route, tell us plainly if you are the Christ. So you pick up stones, all of a sudden he just vanishes out of thin air. If that's not
Yeah.
a statement.
Yeah, I just think that, because it keeps going, and we just read 39, it says, therefore they sought again to seize him, but he escaped out of their hand. To seize him. So they're not going to throw stones, they're going to capture him, arrest him. He escaped out of their hand. We don't really know how that happened, but here's the thing, if it's not in God's timing, it's just plumb not going to happen. That's all there is to it. And so, we've said before here that if the job is yours, others need not apply.
Right.
That's the way God works. And we all have stories about how, we've been sustained and we've gotten jobs or not gotten jobs in a miraculous manner, or whatever the case might be. And so what we see here, and the reason I brought all that out is to kind of bring a little more sense, for me anyway, on chapter 11. We're going to take a look at this. This is very interesting. It says, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany. You could say a certain man, but this isn't just any man. This wasn't somebody that was just part of the crowds and like these blind men or Bartimaeus or whoever. This was somebody that was near and dear to Jesus. Now, we don't find a lot of those kind of people in the scriptures. We find obviously his disciples, but I'm talking about from the masses and from the crowds. There's just a handful of people that Jesus grew up with and that he loved and was friends with and all those things. Lazarus is one of those people. Not just Lazarus, but his two sisters as well, Mary and Martha. So he says, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil, which we haven't studied about yet, and John. But it was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. And I think that's key in this whole passage to understanding this. He whom you love. Remember when the centurion came and said, my son is sick? In John chapter, I think it's 2, maybe 4. He comes in and says, my son is sick. Had he ever met the centurion? Had he ever met the son? No, but there was faith. There was a blessing that day because he said, go your way, your son is made well. But he says, he whom you love is sick. See, that's new in the scriptures so far, at least in John. Lazarus, your friend, the one that you love. He loved Mary, he loved Martha. There's a difference now in the way that Jesus, in this person, there's a difference, is what I'm trying to say. This person's a little different than the others. Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. He already knew what was going to happen. What do you mean it's not unto death? We know Lazarus died. Guess we just have to keep reading. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Makes it very, very clear that he loved these people. There's a different kind of relationship here. I believe that he grew up with these siblings. I believe that, because we see Jesus starting his ministry at 30 and going into the wilderness before that, or just after that, and all that. But I think that he loved these people because he grew up with them, and he knew them. And so, verse 6, so when he had heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Now how easy would it have been for it says, verse 3, the sisters sent to him. How easy would it have been to tell those messengers Lazarus is healed? It would have been very easy for Jesus to do that. In fact, he did that on occasion. Especially because it's who he loves. It's a friend. Think about when we hear, about people that we don't know personally and they're sick. We have concern for them. We pray for them. If it's in prayer requests, and or just random people like in a shooting or something, we'll pray for the families. We do that kind of thing. But when it's somebody that you love and know, there is a difference. I'm telling you, it's a big difference. And it's not anything that we can really help. It's just natural. So with Jesus, there's a difference here. And so he says, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Which, keep in mind, let's go back to the very end of chapter 10. Verse 39, we just read it. He escaped out of their hand because they sought to kill him. And he went away again beyond the Jordan to the place where John was baptizing at first. And there he stayed. So what's he doing? He's getting out of the hotbed. That's what he's doing. So you have Jerusalem, which is right here. This is where everything, all the red hot madness is going on when people want to kill him. So he goes out beyond the Jordan, right? So the Jordan River, right here. He goes out into where John was in the wilderness. He was baptizing and all that. Jesus now leaves and goes out into the wilderness again. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious when you think. They want to kill him. He wants to get out of there. He needs to escape. And so he says, when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after 2 days, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. And Judea is a region where Jerusalem is, and Bethany. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again? What are you doing? You're going right back into the heart of the lion, as it were. And you're taking a huge risk by going back there. See, they don't really understand that everything's in God's timing. All they can see is what we would be able to see if we were in their shoes, and they want to kill you. Why on earth would you want to go back there? That's all they can understand, and all they can see. And who can blame them? Why are you going back to some place where they want to kill you? And so I like Jesus' answer though. He says, Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. That's kind of a curious answer, isn't it? You know what I think it means? I think he's saying, it doesn't matter that they want to kill me. As long as they're in darkness, Jesus is the light of the world, I'm going to show up there. And it doesn't matter that the world around us is so dark. It doesn't mean that we get to put our light out. It doesn't mean that we need to stop shining. It means that there's 12 hours in the day. There's work to be done. And Jesus is saying, I don't care that they want to kill me. I'm going to go there anyway. And I'm going to work. Didn't he tell that? He says, I'm going to work. I and my Father have been working up until now. And so Jesus is saying, I'm not going to stop just because they want to kill me. I'm going to keep going. He says, if anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. Who's the light of the world? It's Jesus. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. He's not going to give any reason for anybody to stumble. He's not going to withhold the light from those sitting in darkness.
Yeah, this is kind of puzzling, isn't it? But the thing that comes to my mind is, why should I let them affect me? Why should I now slither around at night, slip in there at night, and let them influence me and affect my ministry or my purpose? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to walk during the daytime, like I always have. I'm not going to now slither around at night. Then I won't see. I'll lose vision. I'll lose sight of why I'm here. And all that. It's kind of tricky. Yeah.
So I think that, and like you said, he's not going to back down from it. So they said, why are you going there? He's saying, they're not going to stop me. And indeed, doesn't stop him. And so, these things he said, and after that he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up." Then his disciples said, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. He's going to get better." However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. You can blame him. When you make a statement like that he sleeps, they knew that the messengers had come. They said he was sick. Now a couple days has gone by, and Jesus knowing, as only Jesus knew, that he had actually died. And so here his disciples are thinking, last time we heard was that he was sick. Now you're telling us that he's sleeping. He's going to get better. Why wouldn't he get better? Then Jesus said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead." I like that. Sometimes we just need to hear it straight, right? Lazarus is dead. "And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go." That you may believe? I thought these were people that had already professed a faith in Jesus. It just goes to show you that we don't just do that once and we call it good. We have to continue to believe.
Yeah.
These are his disciples and apostles that he says that you may believe. Do we just believe one time and then we're good? What about each new challenge that we meet? What about each new trial? Don't we need to believe in those situations too? Last week, Brother Stanley brought a message on believing that Jesus is the Son of God. I don't think that's just a one-time thing. I think in order for us to keep going in our walk, we need to continually believe that. Because as long as we believe that, we believe that he is who he says he is, and that he can do the things that he says that he can do. And so that's why I think it's a continual walk. And so Jesus was pleased that he wasn't there. Why? Because he would have healed him. As we're going to find out. He would have healed Lazarus, and it would have been just another check mark, an amazing miracle, of course, but it just would have been another tally mark of the people that he healed. With Lazarus, we're going to create an entirely new board. We're not just going to put a check mark next to somebody that he healed. It's going to be different. It's going to be a lot different. And so he says, "Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him." They were convinced, because of all the hostility that we just read about and recapped, that they were going to die in Jerusalem on this trip. And so it's kind of ironic that he says, let's go die with him, when he actually was arrested. And what did they do? Were they willing to die with him? No. Would they have been at that time willing to die with him? Well, judging by what happened later, who knows, a year later, whatever the time might be, maybe not even that. The answer is no. But the attitude is, Jesus is going to be captured and killed at this event, because we're going back into the lion's den. And let's just go. Let's go with him, because he's going to be killed and we need to be killed along with him. So that's their attitude. Now those are prophetic words, because they actually were killed later. Just not at this time, and not at the time that Jesus was captured. You read Acts, and you read Fox's Book of Martyrs and Martyr's Mirror, you find out that these apostles made the ultimate sacrifice. And so, none of them except for one, and even Judas Iscariot, none of them except for one out of the 12 died a natural death. We believe that John actually, in old age, died in exile. It wasn't for lack of trying. They said they actually tried to poison John, but he survived. Survived long enough to go to exile and write Revelation. So very, very important. And so when Jesus came, he found that he had already been dead in the tomb 4 days. So at the time that he knew, it was 2 days, now another 2 days to go there. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Those are strong words. First of all, they're words of faith. And secondly, it's assuming that Jesus would have healed him. Why wouldn't he have? He loved him. You see a friend that's sick, you know that you have the power to do it, you would heal him, without a doubt. He's healing all sorts of strangers. Why wouldn't he heal? And she knows that he's healing strangers. Why wouldn't you heal your friend, the one that you love? Of course he would. And so she's putting all these things together. She said, if you would have been here, my brother would still be alive. If you would have come when we sent messengers to you, and you came at that moment, that's what she's saying, he would still be alive. But see, Jesus had something else in mind, didn't he? This wasn't just going to be another tally mark on the list of people that he's healed from afar or near, by touching them or by speaking. This is going to be different. This is going to be amazing, as if the others aren't amazing. This one's going to be more amazing. And so, but even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Wow. That is faith. That tells me that she believes Jesus is able to raise him from the dead. Even now, what does she mean by that? After he's dead. Do we have that kind of faith? To believe that Jesus can raise the dead? And so, keep in mind, this is before Jesus' resurrection. What kind of faith did Abraham have when he walked up the mountain with his son and was about to kill his son? The son that had been promised to him in his old age, the son that was promised that would give him the stars of the sky as a descendants, the sand of the sea. You mean that one I'm going to kill? No, you mean Ishmael. No, I mean Isaac. That's the one. Do we have faith like that? See, Abraham, it says in the scripture, says that Abraham at that moment was justified by his faith. Not by his works necessarily, but by, he says, Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And so Martha here believes that Jesus can even raise Lazarus from the dead if that's what it takes. And so Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Talk about the timing of Jesus' return. Resurrection, last day. Case closed, if you ask me. Okay? Resurrection, last day. Okay, he's going to rise again in the resurrection. Well, she believed that he would rise again in the resurrection. But that's not really what she's asking about. And this is the most important statement of this chapter that Jesus says to her, in my opinion. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. You want to talk about cutting to the chase, right to the chase. I am the resurrection and the life. I can make him live today, and I can make him live when I come at the end of the age. He says, he who believes in me, though he may die, shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Jesus is saying, you don't have to wait for the end of the age. I'm the resurrection of life today. That's who Jesus is today. And so, why could he raise Lazarus? Why could he call him out from the grave and give him life again? Because he is the resurrection and life. It's not some event that he has no control over and it's just going to happen anyway. No. Jesus is that life. Jesus is the resurrection. And so he says, and she just very admirably speaks her faith and says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ. Who else said that? Didn't Peter say that? Peter said that. And others in their faith may not have said those words, but they said it. They said it. It says, who is to come into the world, period. I mean, even though we grew up together, and even though we were friends, our friends, and you love our family, we love your family, she still drew that line and said, you are the Christ. And the mother, Mary and Joseph, had to draw that line, and even though they raised Jesus, they had to realize that he was. You know what, one of the things I talked to Brother Stanley about after his message last week was, I never caught that. There in Luke, when the boy Jesus, 12 years old, and they went, and his parents, the Bible just gives that for clarity, his parents. But they go there, and you can tell Mary is at her wit's end trying to find Jesus, and she's panicking. We know that as a parent, that if you lose sight of your child for 1 second in a store, in a park or something, you panic. You panic. You know what that feels like. And as a kid, you don't care because you're just running around. But when you're an adult and you're a parent, that is the scariest feeling. Your heart sinks immediately. And so how sick do you think they felt when they had lost their son? It had been days now. It says they searched for him for days. And they went into the temple, and there he was. And what did Mary say to him? Your father and I have been looking for you. And what is his response? I must be about my father's business. Capital F. So he responded with like terminology. But I think that was a reminder to Mary that that's not really my father. And I have a bigger purpose here then. And you're kind of losing sight of that. I think they were kind of losing sight of that. Because like you brought out, how do they hear Gabriel and see the angels and the wise men and all that? How do you go from that to, what are you doing, son? Your mother and your father are upset that you left us, but see, they had to understand Jesus was up to something different. He's not going to be like the rest of his brothers and sisters who they raised with their rules and their, everything applied to him. But it did say that Jesus went with him and was subject. That's very, very important. And so what we see is that Martha gives this answer that I believe that you are the Son of God who has come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come and is calling for you. Now I picture a house just crowded. It says that the Jews had gathered together, crowded with people that were grieving with Mary and Martha. And so here you have Martha running in, and I think she's just whispering in her ear, Jesus is here. Now that gets you excited because now you know something can happen, right? Not only is he a friend, a close friend, but now you know he has the power to do something about your brother. And so I think she just whispers it, and Mary runs out of the house without telling anybody and goes out to meet Jesus. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him, which was a little bit outside of town. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep there. So now we get a window into what was going on, as if we didn't know. What was going on in the house? Weeping. And I've never gone through what she's going through. I will one day. We all will. If we haven't already. I'm telling you, it's going to be a sad event. We can sit here and we can say all day long that it's not going to be sad or that we're happy or whatever, but it will. I guarantee it will. Okay? And the reason I know that is because of John chapter 11. And Jesus, in all of his knowledge, in all of his foresight, in all of Martha's foresight, and Mary's foresight, that he'll live again. Let me ask you this, did it bring him a lot of comfort at that time? They were weeping in their house with the knowledge that he'll live again. We're human. Right. We're gonna be overcome with grief. They were weeping in the house, and the people that were there in the house said, well, she's just gone to the tomb to weep. She wants to see where they laid him. Then Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, and she fell down at his feet. saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. There's a little bit of anger in that. Maybe not anger, but regret, sadness. He'd still be alive, and we wouldn't be doing this right now if he would have come when we called you. Remember, we're not talking about the tally mark of I'm alive and sick. There's no tally mark so far for the other board that says I've died.
You know, Andrew, this must have, obviously this was a conversation between the two sisters.
Oh,
'cause
absolutely.
They're saying the exact same thing.
And not just between the sisters, I believe, the other Jews.
Yes. And so this was, obviously, they knew this, but notice also she fell down at his feet, so even though these emotions were coming out, he was still Lord, and, you know, he's still,
Yeah.
you know, how many times have we gone to the Lord in prayer with a lot of emotion, you know, whether it's frustration or, you know what I'm saying, we go to read that in the Psalms a lot, just utter exasperation over something, you know, you just go, but at the same time, you're mindful of who you're praying to, you know.
You have to be.
Yeah.
You have to be. And so, I just, as we're reading this, I want to capture the emotion that's going on, because what we're going to read in a minute, it just has to make sense. And I'm telling you that even though there is all sorts of reasons that people could justify not being sad, we're sad. They were sad. And we're going to be sad. And even, you know, in these situations, it's okay to be sad. And so she tells him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You've saved other people that were strangers. You would have saved Lazarus. It says, therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Now, I looked this word up. Okay? Groaned. Because to me, it's fascinating that Jesus, the Son of God, would be affected so much
Right.
by this event.
Right.
This points to the humanity of our Lord. Let's quickly go over to Matthew chapter 9. Now, I didn't tell you what the word was, but I want you to, and we're going to paint a picture here of what this means, because in Matthew and in Mark are two verses, same word that we see in John. Boys, it translated differently. Or is it? Matthew 9:30 says, remember when Jesus healed two blind men? And their eyes were opened, the blind men. And Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows it. What in the world? Are you saying that groaned is in this? It's the same Greek word. Where is it? Let's go to Mark chapter 1, verse 43.
What was it? I'm sorry, Mark what?
Mark 1:43. Okay, those were the blind men. Now this is a leper. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once. And said to him, see that you say nothing to anybody, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony to them. In verse 43, and he strictly warned them and sent him away at once. Where's groaned in that? See, here's what I think the idea is. It says, when Jesus saw Mary weeping, the Jews who came with her were weeping. We're not talking crying. We're not talking a little tear falls out of my eye. We're talking uncontrollable sobbing. You can't control this. It's weeping. It comes straight from the heart. This isn't conjuring up a tear for the camera. This is something that comes out of yourself, and you can't control it. And that's what he's observing Mary do. And it says he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Well, I think that when Jesus warned those lepers that day, and he warned the blind men, and he strictly warned them, I think there was that he wasn't just telling them with all of his emotion, all of his strength, he was telling them, warning them. And it wasn't something that he just said, it was something that he felt. And said, do not tell anybody. See, we know the difference. We know the difference when we've talked to people or whatever. You can tell somebody something, or you can tell somebody something. Okay?
That's right.
Where it's not just the voice, it's your whole being given over to that command. And it's the invisible, I'm telling you with every fiber of my being to not do that, or to do it, or whatever the case might be. Now I know when my boss tells me there's a difference. He stares at me right in the eyes, and he tells me, you know, don't tell anybody this. He's told me that before. Don't tell anybody this. This isn't to leave this office. You've heard that. Okay, that's different than just like, whatever. But when Jesus strictly warned those men and that other man to not tell anybody, he meant business. Well, they went and told anyway. That's not on Jesus' part. That's on their part. But I think that when Jesus groaned in the Spirit, there was a part of him that was inaudible, and it just gripped him more than you can be gripped by words. And I think that that's what it means that when he says he groaned, he was overtaken by this emotion that you can't speak. So what does it say? When he saw all these people crying and weeping, he says he groaned in the Spirit. He was troubled. His spirit was dealing with him strictly. His spirit was compressing him. And he felt his spirit turn on him, essentially. He says the word groan carries with it a stern dealing with either toward another person or a feeling within yourself. Jesus felt these words. Jesus felt these words. He felt the crying instead of just saying it. In the same way, he felt the pull of grief as it was dealing with him, instead of just observing those who were sad. It affected him. Make a long story short. He felt it, instead of just looking, oh, they're crying over there. No, he felt it. When he saw that, he groaned. And we're not even done. He groans again. And he said, where have you laid him? Where is he? Where's this tomb? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. What's the next scripture? The shortest verse in the Bible. All these people are weeping. He's groaning. Gripped his spirit. And now Jesus weeps. See, that's our Lord knows it. When we take to him something in prayer, when we have a concern, he doesn't just hear it from afar, he feels it. This is what this scripture tells me, is that he feels it. We sing the song, Does Jesus Care? Oh yeah, we do. And he cares. So this tells me that when I have a concern for myself or for others, and I take it to him in prayer, he feels it. He doesn't just listen and say, that's nice. He feels it. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. And some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have also kept this man from dying? That's the third time somebody said that. They're thinking, the only way that Jesus could have played this out is to mark another tally on this board of I healed somebody. Push that board aside for a second. We're going to get a new board that says resurrected at the top. It says completely different than the others. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, he's gripped by this emotion. He's letting this emotion move him and feeling this passion. Just like he felt the passion when he told them, don't tell anybody. He's feeling this passion. He said, take away, and he says, then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. getting back to Noah's devotion, dead things stink, okay? Put that on your team, buddy. Dead things stink. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. And she's right about that. And what else does that indicate? If he's alive and just faking the whole thing, there's no stench, okay? There's no stench of death. There is a stench of death. Why? Because he died. He died. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. We don't have any record of a prayer. What does he mean by you've already heard me? I think he already prayed before, and he knew what he was going to do. And God had already given him the answer. Go there to Lazarus and perform this miracle. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now we get it. Now we understand why Jesus is doing these things and why he would speak these words before he calls them. Now when he had said these things, now everything's done, and he's got that out of the way, the people understand that Jesus is doing this by the power of his Father. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. Now, I don't think he was able to move his feet very much, and I don't think they wrapped him really tight. Loose enough to where he could wiggle free a little bit and come off that deathbed. And yeah, he was bound and everything, but he was able to shuffle on out. I don't think he's making big strides. But he was bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. He's probably barely breathing now that he has his breath back. Well, it doesn't give much of a reaction from the crowd, other than some believed in him for this event, and some just wanted to rat on him, the Pharisees.
It's a big fanfare, raises him and says, loose him and let him go.
Yeah.
You know, today's preachers just make, these so-called faith healers, they make a big to-do about it, big fanfare, There's just a few words after this. A major miracle, just a few words.
And up until this point, Jesus had not raised anybody from the dead, at least in the account of John. There was a son, I believe, that he did raise from the dead. Or it was a daughter, maybe. It was a girl. He put everybody out of the room and he took her by the hand. But that just points to what Jesus doesn't want, and that's all the acclamation and all the praise of men. And like you said, he didn't say, gather all the townsfolk and come here. It was the people who were standing by that were already saddened about Lazarus. Now, word got out, as the word is going to get out. That's just a natural thing to do. And so verse 45, then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seeing the things that Jesus did believed in him. Many did, but you're always going to have your ones that don't. Always. It says, but some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus did. They're going to tell them. And the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do, for this man works many signs? If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. What do you think their number one fear was, other than losing prestige? It was that the Romans would say, no more temple, no more worship. You can't do that anymore. We're not going to let you do your thing anymore. We're going to come in and we're going to force you to serve a certain way, or smash your altars, or whatever the case might be. They were genuinely afraid of it. If he causes too big of a stir, the Romans are going to come in and do something about it. It says, and one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. I love that. I should lead with that in my next team meeting at work. He says, you know nothing at all. He says, nor do you consider that it is expedient, it's advantageous for us that one man should die for the people. You mean that instead of a group punishment, Just let him hang out there. Let him die. It's okay that he dies, as long as we're all okay. So they're saying, let him just keep going the way that he's going. It says, and not that the whole nation should perish. Just let's string him out and let him go. We're going to get him eventually. He's going to die eventually. Isn't that what he's saying? But I like this, that he said this, because what it really means is that one man is going to die for the people. Isn't that what Jesus did? Now this he did not say on his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. Indeed he did. And not only for that nation, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. So now they're not just trying to, hey guys, let's get up early in the morning and try to surround Jesus. Now they're actually actively plotting to put him to death. They're not just going to seize the moment and grab him, and if he happens to say something, yeah, he's on our hit list, but we're not going to make an effort. They're actually now, what do they call that, scheming and plotting his death, which involved what? Paying off one of his apostles? They weren't about doing that. Therefore Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness to a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. And now his time of preaching in the temple and walking among them, it's over. It's over. Now if they didn't want him before, they really want him now. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They thought, well, every Jew has to go to the Passover. This is the one you don't miss. That's like the Super Bowl. No one else watches football. And it's someone who doesn't care about the NFL, but they'll watch the Super Bowl, right? People don't go to church any other time but Christmas and Easter, right? This is the one holiday that every Jew is going to go to. It's the Passover. It's the most important one of the year. Then they sought Jesus and spoke among themselves as they stood in the temple. What do you think? Will he not come up to the feast? Rhetorical question. Of course he's coming up. He has to come up. This is the one that everyone makes. It says, now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. Now, we see that we're basically to the end of Jesus' ministry. He can no longer walk openly among the Jews. Jerusalem's not a welcoming place anymore. It was when he was 12, and he was a boy. But as soon as he started telling the leadership what they didn't want to hear, it's not a welcoming place anymore. And so we see kind of a shift in the fact that now they're going to get Jesus any way they can. Not above scheming and plotting and breaking the Sabbath like they accused Jesus of doing. They did that. And staying up all night. The night they arrested him, they broke their own commandments. So, but it just points to me, this chapter, about the humanity of Jesus and how he didn't just hear and see, he felt. So when we take our request to him, he feels those things. We should remember that, because it reminds us that Jesus was human. And the scriptures I didn't read in Hebrews, you've been over them, but it says that we don't have a high priest that can't sympathize with our weaknesses. He can sympathize with our weaknesses. And so when we feel something, he's already felt that. That brings me comfort.
Amen.
To know that. We already went through it. He's been there and he's done it. If he didn't, then it'd be a little weird, trying to describe our emotions, but it's not weird to describe our emotions. Does anybody have anything else? All right.
Amen.
Dear Father, we're very thankful to be in your house today. Very thankful, Father, for this gathering and for the saints that are here, Lord. We do pray that these words would go with us, Father, and all these words that we've heard today and we'll hear. We pray, Lord, that as we try, Lord, to put these things in our lives, Father, knowing that Jesus is our forerunner and that he is the one, Father, whom we follow. Knowing, Lord, that he's already done these things. We only ask, Lord, that we'd be faithful as we've been called upon to be faithful in our time. We ask that you'd answer these requests that will be offered, Father, and that you'd heal those, Lord, who are sick. We think of Julie, Lord, as she recuperates. Gracie, Lord, as she goes in for surgery later. Pray all this in Jesus' name.
Amen.